From the very first instance of Stellar Blade being shown off, I think there was one particular aspect that everyone was hyper-fixated on, and well, for good reason. And I'm definitely not going to pretend like I was above it all, because I can definitely appreciate some good assets in a video game, especially in today's modern video game climate.
For a modern gaming audience.
But I think the thing that interested me the most about Stellar Blade at the time called Project Eve is when they originally showed off the game, they made it look really like a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta style game, with extremely fast-paced combat, non-stop, over-the-top action moments, and just a fun kind of turn your brain off action movie type experience with actual depth to the combat that would be developed the longer you play it. And we really don't get many games like that anymore. I mean, even games that traditionally embrace that combat style like God of War have become this awful, slow-paced, bastardized version of the fun genre they used to embrace, and Stellar Blade looked like the step in the right direction for action games, at least based on the trailers. Now, fast forward to the demo, and I will be the first one to admit I was not impressed with what I saw. The combat felt super slow, monotonous, the movement speed during combat was really slow, you felt really underpowered, enemies were extremely spongy. It felt like God of War 2018 and Ragnarok's combat with a little bit more flair added to it. But, you know, I decided I'm still gonna pick up the game. I like everything that Shift Up is doing. It seems to be like the antithesis of the typical modern gaming experience, so I still wanted to support the game, so I picked it up, and I am happy to say that my impressions of the demo could not be more far off. I mean, I guess that's not really the right thing to say, but the game gets incredibly fun the longer you play it, and all the issues I had with the demo started to disappear, and overall, I am happy to say that I was completely wrong based on my demo impressions, and I really am just happy that this game turned out to be as fun as it did. And I think the reason why I enjoyed Stellar Blade as much as I did is because it does something that so few video games try to do in today's modern gaming landscape, and that, of course, is the fact that it tries to be a video game. It's not trying to be a movie. It's not trying to be a TV show. It embraces all the aspects that make video games, and as weird as it is to say, in today's day and age with video games trying to be more and more like Hollywood productions, it felt like a complete breath of fresh air. So, to make a long story short, if you don't want to watch this entire review, I would definitely recommend picking up Stellar Blade. I think it is more than worth the asking price. There is a ton of content here. I beat the game after 30 hours, and I've already started my New Game Plus playthrough, and there's a ton of stuff to unlock even after you beat your first run. So, this is a game that I feel like everybody should play if you're able to, and is definitely worth your money. Now, there are some big issues with it. It's not perfect. This is the studio's first attempt at making like an actual legitimate like console AAA quality game. They do have history in the mobile space, but that is a completely different animal altogether. So for a first outing from this studio, this is absolutely incredible despite all of its issues. So I feel very safe in recommending this game, even at full price. I do not think you're going to be disappointed if you are a fan of action games. But let's go ahead and kick this review off and talk about the most important aspect of Stellar Blade, thank God, and that, of course, is the gameplay. I think it really does speak volumes that in today's current gaming landscape that we have to praise video games that prioritize gameplay of all things, because Western game developers for the most part are pseudo wannabe Hollywood types that instead of making video games had dreams of making movies, but they're stuck making something they don't want to, so they try to live vicariously through the medium of video games to live out their dreams of being Hollywood producers. And luckily for Stellar Blade, that is not the case whatsoever. Gameplay is front and center here, and it is absolutely fantastic. Now, I will say, if you play the demo or the very first part of this game, you might fall into the same trap that I did, where you get a feeling that this game heavily takes inspiration from the Souls-light genre. Now, I'm not saying Souls-like. Light is what I'm saying. This game is not a Dark Souls clone. I never thought it was a Dark Souls clone, but people cannot differentiate those two things. When I'm referring to a Souls-light, I'm referring to something like a Sekiro game, where they have like the foundational building blocks of a Souls game, but then they differentiate it a little bit in the form of the combat to kind of make it its own unique experience from a traditional Dark Souls-like experience. That's what I would categorize the first part of this game as, is a Souls-light experience. Enemies are extremely spongy. You're having to micromanage crowds of enemies and parry and dodge every single move. Your movement speed is not that fast whatsoever. You're kind of limited on how many different combos and special abilities you can pull off. So the combat kind of slows down to a crawl at the very beginning of this game, and you might get the wrong impression for the tune of the rest of the game, because once you get out of the first area called Ido 7, the game really starts to pick up and it really starts to speed up, and you have a lot more tools and abilities at your disposal that makes the speed of combat a completely different experience. I feel like the demo portion of this game is probably going to do more of a disservice to people who might actually get turned off by the perception of what this combat style really is. Now, I understand why it's in the game, because it introduces you to the core mechanics in order to learn them in a more controlled environment, but I feel like if you're like me and you don't like that particular style of combat, and we're hoping this to be more of like a fast-paced action game like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, you might be disappointed. But luckily, the longer you play, the more upgrades you get, the more different special abilities you get, the faster and just more fun the combat gets, and the less Souls-light it feels, and it feels more so like a Ninja Gaiden game, I would say, than anything else, which if you have never played one of those, they are incredibly fast-paced action games that are a lot of fun. So overall, I think the combat is absolutely phenomenal in this game. I really enjoyed it from start to finish. It never got old. You get a great variety of special abilities that look absolutely fucking incredible to pull off. They're super fun to chain together. There's a lot of strategy that goes into them. Certain moves will heal you. Certain moves will drain the enemy's shield. Certain moves will do damage once the shield is down versus hardly any damage when the shield is still up. So there's like a nice level of strategy and, you know, prioritization when it comes to pulling off your different moves and managing the two different energy sources you have that you build up. By either pulling off a parry or a dodge, the red meter is charged by dodging, and the blue meter is charged by parrying. So you have to kind of prioritize which way you want to counter the enemy during combat to build up that particular meter to use a specific ability that might be more beneficial to you in that particular instance. So the combat can get incredibly deep, which I really enjoyed, and at the same time, it's just fun, man. Like, I will be the first to admit too, and I don't care, like, difficulty options exist for a reason. Cope and seethe. If you have a problem with someone playing on a different difficulty than you, you're a fucking loser. It's not an e-dick measuring contest to say you beat a game on hard versus easy. Sorry, but I played the game on easy. I had a great time with it. If you are worried about the difficulty aspect of the game, easy definitely solves that. If you kind of just want a more kind of fun experience with still a decent amount of difficulty, like, easy mode in this game is not easy. Like, there's still some difficulty there. You will die a few times if you're not paying attention in combat, or, you know, pulling off the right type of counter moves and everything like that, especially if you have the action assist turned off. But overall, man, I had a great time playing this. So if you're looking for more of just like a fun experience than a sweat fest experience, which I'm gonna be honest, when I'm done working for the day and done with my workout or whatever, I don't really want to just sit there and be miserable, dying over and over again to the same enemy, making no progress for the few hours I get to play video games each night. So for me, easy mode was a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend that if you are worried about the difficulty aspect of this game, because if you want the challenge, it's there for you. If you don't necessarily want it, you have that option too. So I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's great that both crowds can be satisfied in that regard. And overall, man, I think the gameplay here is an absolute win. I did not get bored of it once. It was fun from start to finish. They were constantly giving you new abilities and buffs and ways to chain together these insane combos and ability chains that just made combat an absolute fucking pleasure to play. And I really cannot recommend this enough if you are a fan of like sword-based action combat. I think this is one of the best examples we've gotten in recent history, and overall for this studio's first attempt at this combat combat style, it being better than most games in the genre is absolutely phenomenal, and it makes me very excited to see which direction they go in with a potential sequel or DLC or new IP within this particular genre. But there are some negative aspects to the gameplay that I do kind of want to point out. I feel like the platforming in this game is by far the worst thing about this game, hands down. The platforming is absolutely fucking horrible. And there's one reason for this, and it's very easy to notice from the very beginning when you're playing the game. It is very jank for one reason, and that is the auto clambering system. I think this is best described when I say, like, you're walking over an elevated surface, okay? You're on a pathway. There's 2 railings on either side of you, okay? You bump up against a railing, and you're thinking, okay, I'm not gonna fall off because there's a fucking railing here, obviously. But nope, if it's at the right height, your character will step up on top of the railing, throwing you off the edge. And this happens countless times throughout the game, and it is very obnoxious, especially considering the fact that fall damage in Stellar Blade is turned up to the max. Fall damage is the most deadly force in this game by far. Same with Dragon's Dogma 2. I don't really understand that, but yeah, fall damage is absolutely deadly. You fall from any height more than 5 feet, you're taking major damage, and because of this, it becomes very annoying as you're trying to traverse the environment, especially during some of the jumping puzzle segments of this game where you're trying to jump from platform to platform, and the auto clambering system essentially fucks you up and you have to restart the entire thing or restart from a prior checkpoint. It becomes very annoying very quickly, and it makes you wonder why these platforming segments were even in the game. I get that it was probably to like kind of break up the flow of combat a little bit so it didn't become monotonous just being in combat the entire length of the game, but I don't know, man. The platforming here is by far the most obnoxious kind of gameplay element that I encountered, and pretty much everybody in my chat as I was playing the game seemed to agree that it definitely needed some work. But not the biggest deal in the world because it's not the main focus of the game, but it just makes you wonder why this was even in the game in the first place, considering how bad it was implemented. So I don't really think it's that horrible of a thing to point to and be like, oh my god, the worst thing about this game is the rare platforming segments you have to encounter. So I think that's more of a positive thing than a negative thing overall, but it's definitely something worth pointing out that definitely needs some improvement in the future. Now, another negative aspect of the gameplay that I did not particularly like was the open world layout. There are a lot of pathways in this game that feel purposely obscured to like slow down your exploration, which I understand hiding things in the environment and things like that, but it goes beyond that to where it's basically how open worlds will purposely segment certain portions of it by like an unscalable cliff or something like that, just to make it so it takes you longer to walk from point A to point B. I think that aspect of the open world is kind of obnoxious. Now, they do remedy this to a certain degree with the campsite mechanic. You can fast travel to a pretty decent amount of campsites around the map, but I don't really think it ever solved the problem, and I kind of dreaded that when I was doing side activities in the game, when I would have to traverse like this massive expanse and go purposely out of my way to walk all the way around an unscalable cliff and approach from the correct angle. So the open world design isn't bad in this game, it just felt unnecessarily segmented, and I think that's the best way I can put it. But luckily, none of the open world exploration areas are so large that it becomes just unmanageable or miserable. So again, not too big of a negative, but I think it's definitely something worth pointing out. But it didn't really take away from the experience that much because there's plenty of cool combat encounters and stuff along the way that kind of break up the monotony of just walking through a desolate wasteland in this post-apocalyptic setting. Now, another negative aspect of the gameplay, I mean, it sounds like I'm being overly negative. I'm not. Remember, these are pretty minor complaints at this point, but I felt like the enemy variety in this game was really lacking. The same enemies you're fighting at the very beginning of the game are pretty much the exact same ones you're going to be fighting at the very end. Again, not the biggest deal, especially considering this is the studio's first attempt at this style of game, but I would have liked to see a little bit more enemy variety, especially in the main story quest. It felt like the open world exploration areas had more enemy variety than the actual like mainline missions did. So that aspect was kind of annoying, that you were basically just fighting the exact same enemies that you saw at the beginning of the game, just with a lot more health. But yeah, again, it's just kind of like a minor complaint. fine. I mean, you knew how to deal with them, so I guess that kind of like didn't really lead to too much annoyance. It just would have been kind of cool to see a little bit more enemy variety. And another minor complaint I have is any enemy that was not wielding a weapon. I felt like the timing for dodging and parrying felt a little bit off. If the enemy had a weapon, I guess maybe because it was a little bit more telegraphed, or you could kind of see and judge when it was going to make impact a lot better. But any enemy using like their fists or head or just like, I guess, blunt force of their body to deal damage to you, they were a little harder to avoid. Like, I was perfectly parrying and dodging pretty much any enemy the game threw at me that had like a staff, a sword, or any sort of weapon like that. But any enemy that would attack with its body, I felt like the timing was a little bit off. Again, that could be my inability to get good, so I'm not going to blame the game entirely on that, but it's something I did notice that I'm not sure if anybody else did as well. But let's go ahead and talk about a few more positive things here that I almost forgot to mention. So the first being is the third-person shooter segments. Now, there are several moments in this game where basically your sword gets deactivated and you're forced to use your drone as a gun, and these segments are fucking awesome, man. I really enjoyed the third-person shooter combat, and it is rumored that Shift Up's next game is going to be a co-op third-person shooter game based on the Nikke characters, and after playing the third-person shooter combat in this game, that gets me very excited for the possibility of that in the future, because these third-person shooter segments are fucking fun. I wish there was more of them in the game. The only negative thing I have to say about them is they're very limited, and they're usually paired with platforming puzzles, which, as we mentioned earlier, is not the best. But I really enjoyed the third-person shooter segments of this game. It felt like a better version of what Nier Automata did when 2B would get inside of her exosuit, and you would have to like play the shmup segments where you would shoot the different machines with your mech for like a prolonged period of time in like an on-rails segment. This was basically kind of that same principle where it just kind of completely changes up the flow of combat every once in a while, but it was way more enjoyable, and I absolutely love the way they implemented it into the game, and it makes me wish there was more of that in the game from start to finish. So very well done in that regard. And then just to wrap up the gameplay segment here, I feel like the boss fights in this game were really fucking cool, man. There's some awesome boss designs in this game, super memorable designs. Unfortunately, there's two final bosses. I got the lamer of the two, depending on which ending you achieve. There are 3 endings that you can get in this game, but I definitely got the worst of the 2 boss fights from like a spectacle standpoint. I technically got the true ending on my first playthrough, so, you know, I guess that was cool. But overall, man, the bosses are fucking awesome in this game. They're all very unique, super memorable, lots of gore during the execution phases of each of them. You're gonna enjoy this if you enjoy action boss fights. So overall, man, I can't stress it enough. This is a fantastic gameplay experience from start to finish. I do have some minor gripes, but considering this is their first actual video game, I can't stress that enough, man. This is the studio's first like actual video game outside of mobile games, and it's this good. I cannot wait to see what they do in the future, man. This is definitely worth your time. If you are a fan of action combat whatsoever, definitely pick this game up. Do not be intimidated by the difficulty aspect. You can turn it down to easy like I did. I guarantee you your penis size will not shrink by 2 inches like the internet will suggest. But overall, man, the gameplay experience in Stellar Blade is exactly as the name suggests. Stellar. Now, there is absolutely no way to sugarcoat this, guys. This game is basically borderline plagiarism of the Nier storyline. Now, I understand that Yoko Taro and the head of Shift Up are actually, like, really good friends, so maybe he, like, basically gave the blessing to use the existing plot of the Nier franchise and build upon it, or maybe Yoko Taro even helped him develop the plot line of the story. I don't know, but if you have played Nier and Nier Automata, you pretty much can see where this plot is going from a mile away. I mean, I don't really think that's necessarily a negative thing because the story is still really interesting and engaging despite that fact, but just don't expect any plot twist to blow you away. I mean, the one at the very end is kind of unpredictable, but not entirely. I don't know, man. It's pretty obvious. They don't really do a great job of differentiating itself from Nier and Nier Automata's storyline, which, again, is fine. The main focus of this game, 100%, is the gameplay. The story is serviceable. It does what it needs to do in order to put you in the different instances and situations needed to give you these really cool gameplay experiences. And towards the end of the game, it actually gets really enjoyable, I must say. Like, the story really got good towards the end of the game in particular. But basically, if you've played Nier and Nier Automata, you have a very good idea the direction that the story is headed into. And I don't really think that's a spoiler to say, because the developers of this game flat out said that Nier Automata is a massive inspiration for this game, and they were not fucking kidding, dude. But overall, I thought the story was enjoyable. I will say, none of the characters were really memorable at all, man. Like, I felt like they kind of just phoned it in. A lot of the voice acting was fucking bad, dude. Like Adam, who is the guy controlling the drone that follows you around throughout the game, like, holy shit, dude. Whoever voiced him did not put in an ounce of effort. It was the most robotic performance I have ever heard in a video game. It made Yong Yeah as Kiryu sound like a professional.
You know, had you just waited 3 minutes, I'd have been a little more grateful. Yeah.
町の情報通何人かに接触して渡りはつけた。
I made contact with a good number of people, just waiting for them to get back to me.
あんたは相変わらず一言余計だ。
There's always something extra, isn't there?
Are you already prepared to leave?
Just finished.
And you, Lily?
We're going to be so close to the...
There's no need to overthink it. Eve is the one going to space anyway. You and I will be waiting in the tech...
I know, but...
Well, we'll see what she sees. So physical distance won't really matter.
And then some of the characters were just very annoying, like Lily. And then, bro, one of the characters in particular, every time I looked at her, it just made me, like, physically uncomfortable. And that was Kaya, dude, the shopkeeper at Zion, which is, like, the main hub area of the game. Like, dude, something about her is just so creepy looking. Like, she looks like a literal living doll, basically. And it just, like, bro, it sends a shiver up my spine, dude. It is absolutely just uncanny to look at her move and talk, or whatever it is. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but something was very off with that character design, man. But I think it's pretty clear to see where all the effort was put into where character designs were concerned. You know, Eve is absolutely gorgeous. Her outfits are all really unique and very visually appealing for numerous different reasons. Again, my favorite female character in the game was not Eve. It was actually Raven. She was absolutely double cheeking it up, bro. Better than Eve could ever hope to. And it's interesting too, her suit is actually the one you see in all the marketing material, like right here. That's the Raven suit. So by far one of my favorites easily. But yeah, she was definitely my favorite female character. I liked her design a lot, but they put a lot of effort into the character designs, man. And I think for obvious reasons, the sex appeal was obviously a huge selling point of this game. And well, you know, it was definitely a overwhelming success. I mean, I could touch on the censorship controversy real quick. I've seen it. It's an absolute fucking joke. The outfits that they're claiming were censored, literally were never shown in any sort of marketing material or pre-release footage. The copies of the games that reviewers got already had the costumes changed before they even got their hands on it. The only reason they were still on the disc version is because discs are usually printed a month or two before the game releases because of shipping logistics. And the whole censorship argument kind of falls apart, in my opinion, when you consider the fact that the skin suit and the bikini and several other skins in the game that are far more revealing than the bunny swimsuit skin, you know, are still in this game. If there was some grand-rooted conspiracy theory by Sony to censor the sexiness of this game, why would they have helped in the development of it? Why would they have published it? And why is it only 1 or 2 skins that aren't even the most revealing in the game that are affected? My guess is what happened surrounding the censorship controversy is some random ratings agency in some country, like, I guess, identified that one skin and said, hey, this one shows a little bit too much cleavage, fix it before release and you're good to go, and shift up wanting to have one version of the game across all different regions, probably just made the change before reviewers even got their hands on it, probably not expecting anyone to give a shit, because people are saying they promised the game to be uncensored on release. Well, if you actually look at the timing of that comment, it was a day after reviews came out. So reviewers already had the quote-unquote censored build of the game that they reviewed the game based off of. So Shift Up, from the time of making that statement, was referring to any future iterations of the game not being censored. So the timeline does not add up for it to be some deep-rooted conspiracy theory to conceal Eve's titties, dude, because if you look at the other suits in the game, then it's definitely a case of
mission failed. We'll get them next time.
And then I've seen another narrative going around that they toned down the blood and gore. That is just objectively not true. They did tone down the amount of blood that I guess sticks to Eve's character models in certain cutscenes, but that to me is more of a visual downgrade than censorship, because when you kill enemies, there's still just as much blood and gore on the actual character models of the enemies. It's just not blood being, like, I guess, grafted onto Eve's character model as like a splatter effect, which to me screams more of like a visual downgrade in the favor of prioritizing performance versus censorship. But, you know, I don't know how technical people want to get with that type of shit. Maybe when the PC port comes out, that option will still be there, but that to me screamed more of a visual downgrade than actual quote-unquote censorship. So I think the whole censorship controversy is incredibly overblown. If you play the game, you will realize the quote-unquote censored skins in the game are not even the most revealing ones. So it doesn't really make sense. Most likely what I think happened is some random country said, oh, we have a problem with this skin, fix it before launch, and then your game's good to go. Shift Up said sure, and that's the reason why things are the way that they are. Or they could have wanted to change the skins because they didn't want random skins to be more revealing than the actual, like, special skins you earn for doing particular tasks within the game that are more, I guess, demanding requirements-wise, because the sexiest skins in the game require, I guess, the most work to unlock. But anyway, I really think it's a controversy. If you play that game and you're unsatisfied with the amount of sex appeal that Eve has, I don't know what to tell you. You might be batting for the home team. But yeah, character model wise, absolutely nailed it, aside from that one creepy shopkeeper. But yeah, none of the characters really were that memorable. It was a little weird having Eve having a British accent. It just didn't really fit, man. I mean, like, for obvious reasons, like if you saw a black dude speaking native Mandarin, for example, it would look uncanny. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the vibe I got. I mean, the voice acting itself for Eve is really well done. Like, her voice actress did a very good job, but it just doesn't really fit the character model, in my opinion. But that's a very minor gripe. It's not really anything that takes you out of the experience. But yeah, overall, I think the story is serviceable, very reminiscent of Nier, nothing original there whatsoever, so don't get too excited on that front. It does end on kind of a cliffhanger, which I'm not going to get into spoilers or anything like that, because I want people to actually experience this game themselves, because I think it's worth your time, and you definitely should go and support this game. But yeah, it does kind of end on a cliffhanger, so I'm hoping that they do further develop this franchise, because I'd definitely be here for it, man. But yeah, overall, I thought the story was fine. It was interesting, had cool elements to it, set up really cool set pieces and memorable moments, had some, you know, half-assed characters, which, you know, whatever, not the biggest fucking deal in the world, but it did its job, and I think that's really all it needed to do in this game, considering the gameplay is clearly the main focus and what everybody should be buying this game for in the first place. So in this last category, I'm just going to touch on a couple smaller topics to kind of wrap this thing up. So first off, let's talk about the soundtrack. Now, if you were a fan of Nier Automata's soundtrack, you will absolutely love the soundtrack here. Some of the songs I like, some of the songs drove me absolutely insane because of the, like, vocals on loop over and over and over again when you're in the open world environments, which can get very repetitive very quickly. But for the most part, I think the music is very well done. It's all very memorable and unique, aside from the fact that it feels almost identical to Nier Automata. But again, I think they were really going for that Nier Automata vibe, and if that's the case, they absolutely nailed it, not just in the story aspect, not just in the female character design department, but also in the music as well. So overall, I think the music is pretty well done for what they're going for. A lot of people in my chat really enjoyed it. Personally, it's not my favorite type of music in video games. I usually prefer music without vocals in the background because of the the issue of it looping over and over again and the vocals starting to sound kind of grating after a while because you just keep hearing the exact same looping lyrics over and over again, because typically background music doesn't seem to be the most diverse when it comes to lyrics. But overall, I think it's fine. I think the music is good. It definitely sets a nice vibe when you're out in the open world or different exploration areas. And I love the fact that it actually has music, because so many modern games now just have you sitting there in silence with no background music whatsoever playing, and it's just kind of like miserable. Like my favorite open world games like Witcher 3, the Elder Scrolls franchise, Final Fantasy, for example, all have really memorable background music that sets the mood when you're just out exploring and doing random shit, and it gets you immersed in the world that you're going through. And I think they really did a good job with that in Stellar Blade as well. So just the fact that there's always music playing in the game nowadays is always a positive in my mind, because so many developers overlook that absolutely crucial aspect of open world game design. So I think it's great that the soundtrack is here and present and sets that mood. Now, I did see that the actual composer of this game is the guy who did Nier Automata and the original Nier soundtrack as well. So it makes a lot of sense, man. They're really not beating those Nier clone allegations, but I don't think they're trying to. Again, I think Yoko Taro and the head of Shift Up are actually good friends, it seems like. So personally, if there's one type of game to mirror, I think Nier is a great template to mirror, because I absolutely loved both of those games. So only positives in my mind. So next up, let's talk about the graphics. I think this goes without saying. The game looks absolutely fucking beautiful. Character designs, I already kind of touched on this. Outstanding, gorgeous, really fucking well done. The physics department really outdid themselves too, which if you play the game for more than 5 minutes, you will more than understand that one very quickly right off the bat. But overall, man, I think graphically this game is absolutely gorgeous, and really nothing negative to say on my front, other than a little bit of artifacting here and there on different environmental elements depending on the camera angle you hit. But again, like, that's minor and it's kind of present in everything you look at. But moving on from that, let's go ahead and touch on the side quests. Now, I don't really know why I didn't mention this when I talked about the open world, but the side quests in this game are kind of generic. They're just fetch quest type things, but the nice thing is they just dump them all on you at once, basically. So you can just pick up all the different side quests for a region, knock them out pretty quickly by fast traveling around to the different camps in the environment, and you get some pretty decent rewards, honestly. Like, they're worth doing. You get a lot of XP, you get a lot of gold, you get some pretty unique items, and none of them felt so obnoxious that I absolutely hated doing them, other than the fishing side quest, because the fishing side quest, for me, the last fish that I needed took like over an hour to appear. Like, I was literally fishing for an hour straight just in order to get the last fish that I needed for the quest to appear, and on the very last piece of bait that I had in my inventory, it finally appeared and I caught the sailfish. So that was the only obnoxious side quest in the game. The rest of them are pretty straightforward for the most part. They are the typical open world fetch quest design. Now, there are some side missions you get from the more major characters in the game that actually do have some story behind them, and those definitely feel a lot more rewarding. But again, nothing really to write home about. I will say I absolutely love the fact that they have this mechanic in the game that when you complete a side quest objective, you get a prompt to teleport back to the person who gave you the quest. So within 3 seconds of completing the side quest, you're right back in front of the person who gave it to you originally, which is fucking great. I wish more games had functionality like that. So it takes a lot of the fucking annoyance and monotony of having to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth out of doing the side quest activities. So that was definitely something I really appreciated as someone who does not like the monotony of having to repeatedly walk up and down the same path over and over again to complete pretty generic side quests. So I thought that was really well done. But overall, guys, I think we have heard enough now. Let's go ahead and move on to the conclusion section of this review. So let's go ahead and wrap up this review, guys. So combat, absolutely phenomenal. Obviously the star of the show and the main focus of the game. Everything in Stellar Blade is catered around the combat, and I absolutely love the game for that. I think they did a phenomenal job with the combat, and for the studio's first attempt at this style of gameplay, they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I mean, the only major complaint I have about the gameplay is the parkour or traversal mechanics that involve of the platforming that, you know, pops up from time to time throughout the game. But from a combat perspective, this is absolutely phenomenal and well worth purchasing the game over alone. Like, I think if you enjoy any form of action combat, this game is going to be right up your alley. Whether you want to play it on easy like me and get a more fun-focused experience, or if you want to grind it out, there is a normal and hard difficulty for people who like more difficult gameplay experiences. There is truly something here for everyone from a gameplay and combat perspective, and I think that is absolutely incredible. So just for that reason alone, I recommend you go and pick this game up, and I think it's more than worth the $70 asking price. So next up, we have the story. Again, this is a one-to-one copy of the Nier storyline. There's not really anything original here. None of the characters really stood out from like a personality or interest standpoint, aside from their sex appeal, which I think is fine. The story in a video game exists to put you in a situation to do cool shit, and basically just keeps the events of the game flowing, and it does that. It does a great job of that, and the story that is there is interesting at times. There are really cool moments, and you're like, oh, that's actually pretty neat. I didn't know that. There are some twists here and there, but the overall theme and plot of the game is very reminiscent of the Nier franchise if you have played those. If you haven't played Nier, then you're in for a massive surprise, and you're probably going to love this even more than I did from a story perspective. But I think the story that's there is perfectly fine, and I think it's good for the most part. So, you know, nothing negative to say on that aspect, aside from the characters being not really the most memorable out there. So next we have the graphics. Obviously, this game is gorgeous. My PlayStation footage capture probably doesn't do it justice because I use the internal capture device in the PlayStation 5, so it probably doesn't look the best. I probably should have used my Elgato to get that crispy 4K HDR footage, but overall, man, visually this game is beautiful. Nothing but positives to say about it in that aspect, and even in the performance mode, the game looks absolutely great. So they did a fantastic job optimizing this game for the PlayStation 5, and if there is a PC port in the future, it'll be really cool to see how great that looks on modern PC gaming hardware. So moving on, we go to the soundtrack. Again, another high point in my opinion. They got the guy who did the Nier music to do it in a Nier inspired game, so you already know it's going to be good. So soundtrack is a definite win in my opinion. The open world and side quests, I feel like is kind of one of the lower points. It could have used a little bit more, I guess, variety or spice, just something to kind of, you know, make it a little bit different than kind of the copy-paste open world format. I did like the fact that there were so many different puzzles and hidden items and areas within the open world environments, but I felt overall they were kind of bland to explore after a certain point. So not the worst I've ever seen in a video game, but definitely not the best, but it's serviceable, which I think is fine. It's not obnoxious. You have plenty of fast travel opportunities, and again, like I mentioned earlier, that side quest mechanic where once you finish an objective, you can teleport back to the person who gave it to you is a massive quality of life improvement that the majority of open world games could really learn a lesson from. So overall, I think it's good, not great, but it gets the job done. So I don't know, guys, to wrap this up, I feel like this game easily deserves a strong, and I mean strong, 8 out of 10. I think this game is a definite home run. This is one of the better games I have played recently. I mean, I really am shocked at how much I enjoyed this game, especially going into it after playing the demo. The demo really gave me the wrong impression of this game, so I would stress to anybody who kind of had a similar experience to me that if maybe you weren't the biggest fan of the demo, hang in there. The game gets so much better the more you play it, and by the end of it, you're gonna really enjoy the ride. So I really recommend this game. A strong 8 out of 10 for me. This game is definitely great. There are some things that hold it back, but overall, I don't think you can go wrong picking this game up for full price, and I think you're going to have a really great time with it through your first playthrough and subsequent playthroughs as well, like I am right now. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comments section below what you think of Stellar Blade. Have you picked up the game yourself? If you did, are you enjoying it? Are you hating it? Let me know your thoughts. thoughts. I'm always interested to hear what other people think of my reviews because, trust me, there's plenty of opinions. But anyway, if you guys did enjoy this video and made it to the end, I would appreciate it if you could drop a like on it. It does go a long way in helping my irrelevant ass stay somewhat relevant on this ever-growing platform, so that would be greatly appreciated. I do have a video planned, which is like a retrospective review on God of War Ragnarok, which, you know, really put into perspective things going into this game, because I played it right before I played Stellar Blade. Maybe the fact that I was so miserable playing that made me like this game even more, I don't know, but either way, Stellar Blade is a massive W. Go pick it up if you have a PlayStation 5. You're not going to regret it. But with all that shit said, I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to check out this video, and for all the recent support as well. You guys are the fucking best, and I really do appreciate it. So with that shit said, I will catch you guys next time.